Welcome to Cannabis Talks, a dialogue on the intimacy and relationship of plant medicine to us as human beings. And this is the very first Cannabis Talks, and I am extremely honoured to have Jason Frost and Derek Perra on today's talk and to introduce you to both of these incredible gentlemen. This is in the lead up to Anzac Day, which is tomorrow. And so Jason Frost is ex-Army of 16 years, medically retired, and he was platoon sergeant. And there's an array of medals and validation of Jason's time in the Army, and I will get him to talk briefly about what that means to us folk that are not necessarily completely up to date with what all that means. We have, and I can speak for myself, I have an understanding and an acknowledgement and a respect, but you've lived the experience. And Derek is ex-Air Force, 15 years, and corporal on a number of occasions because he came in and out of the Army, and also medically retired. So firstly, welcome. Thank you so much. It is a privilege to have both of you here to discuss cannabis and how it has been a part of both your journeys, your incredible journeys over the past years since being medically retired. So Jason, did you want to give a little bit more of a background of yourself, what brought you here, and as in today to talk into Cannabis Talks? Just a bit of a sharing to say hello.
Thanks, Nikki, and thanks for inviting us onto this first episode. Very exciting. So as you said before, I served 16 years in the Australian Army. My career, I specialised in amphibious mobility, so a lot of time on boats within the Army. Surprised to say there's boats in the military. A lot of people think that Navy mainly boats, but we kind of created that link between naval and Army by providing that maritime capability. And in that, I had a fantastic career. I enjoyed it a lot, worked with some incredible human beings, got to see some amazing places, but throughout my career, I sustained a lot of injuries. After 16 years, you could imagine quite a very physical existence. And by the end of that 16 years, I'd taken a few too many hits to my lower back. I'd had a few injuries that had kind of been niggling throughout my career, and it got to the point where I started collapsing and wasn't able to walk or actually do my job anymore. So through that, I was medically discharged, and I was well looked after when I left. I had our Department of Veteran Affairs support me in that transition. And I often say this to people, it wasn't the trauma that I experienced in defence was my major problems after I got out. It was the actual transition into civilian life, because I had an array of medical diagnoses that were chronic. I ended up under some various prescribing algorithms for a lot of heavy sedation and other pharmaceutical medications. And it led me to about, I think it was 2017, which was 2 years after my medical discharge. I was about 117 kilos. I was having seizures every night. My wife had to become my full-time carer. I physically could not, or mentally, or even in any sense, leave the house. And if I did, I had to get drugged up to a heavy extent to be able to go out into public areas, and couldn't do that for very long at all. And this took years. And every time I'd go back to the doctors, they would then diagnosed me with another condition and put me on another array of medicines, hoping that might alleviate the symptoms, but everything seemed to compound it and make it worse. It wasn't until I got introduced to some incredible other veterans that had just come back from the United States, actually, and they were dealing with a lot of the doctors and specialists over there that had started to learn about medicinal cannabis, because obviously they were a little bit ahead of us. And they brought that knowledge back to Australia, and I was able to get access to some medicinal cannabis in those early days. Luckily enough, in 2018, I was authorised by the Department of Veteran Affairs to go on medicinal cannabis for my chronic pain conditions. And that marked a bit of a milestone and a turning point for me. It was the first time I was able to take a medicine and feel like I was coming back out of a fog and kind of start to reconnect. And that led me on a journey of rehabilitation, 2 years of pretty intensive physiotherapy, incorporating new dietary practices to understand what was going on inside of me. That led to, and again, still battling a lot of issues for the next 4 years or so, until I had brain scans which showed up a traumatic brain injury. And this was undiagnosed or misdiagnosed actually as PTSD. So the psych meds that I was on for a long time, and the other pharmaceuticals were actually causing a lot more damage than they were doing anything of real value. And that diagnosis marked my second major turning point. That's when I started actually going after treatments in combination with my medicinal cannabis, things like ketamine infusion, meditative practices, a lot of nootropics and things to help my brain function regain. And it's been that journey that's kind of led me to where I am today, and speaking to you, obviously, through this journey as well, meeting amazing people with their knowledge in the medicinal cannabis space and endocannabinoid health. And that's kind of led me now to advocate for other veterans and first responders who I'm seeing. And again, even my peers now, a lot of people that I served with have a lot of these same injuries, and they're going down the same pathways that I went down. And we're trying our best to provide a lot of education and awareness on some of these other modalities, so we can hopefully get people support before they need to go through the meat grinder and come out the other end rather broken. And again, that's through my lived experience. I'm able to now help others in doing that.
Amazing. Thank you. And Derek.
Yeah.
How
Well,
would you relate to that one for your lived experience?
yeah, for sure. I guess for me, I was introduced to medicinal cannabis after Iraq, coming back, starting treatment for PTSD symptoms, getting put on the medication and prescribing algorithm and the traditional pharmacological psych meds. Um, Ended up about 17 years of heavy psych meds. About 10 years ago, the marriage failed. Slightly, didn't have anywhere to go. Tried a bit of street canna, and found it relieved the symptomology amazingly better than any medication I was on at the time. I think I was on probably about 12 different medications for my mental health. And yeah, I found such relief from it that my treating doctors and psychologists, psychiatrists were like, all right, continue on this medication. This is amazing. It's working. And have continued on that path since. Had similar to Jason, now at a stage where I've been able to stabilize in my condition enough so that once again, the weight goes up. I was 117, 118 kilos, whatever, so half my body weight. Non-functioning. Wife became lifetime carer. There's not really any good sort of story out of all that, except if you can sort of dig out of it, like a few of us have started being able to do with this amazing plant-based medicine. And yeah, we're at a stage where we can fight for other veterans, fight for access to this, and just try and help people where we can.
So, just staying with you, Derek, how, with what you were going through with the weight, the being, I guess, did you feel isolated? How did you feel coming back with all those conditions as coming into here in relation to support? I mean, how was it met generally, just generally speaking? How was it met? How did you find people dealing with or helping and supporting what you were going through?
Yeah, for sure. The Department of Veterans Affairs does have a lot of good support for us. Different bits and pieces besides medication, groups and therapies and hospitalization and all that sort of stuff. The transition for me from military life back into civilian life was interesting because I was 15 when I joined the military. So it was my whole growing up and everything was in that. I guess, yeah, I hadn't really experienced civilian life as an adult. And so coming out of military into civilian was, as it is for most people, a bit of an eye opener at times. Yeah, I don't know if that covers your answer there.
That's good. So I'm just going to go into kind of how we all met, because all three of us have met before. We've communicated. So Derek, you met BJ from Ubuntu quite a few years ago, and as part of your entry into our world, or our entry into your world, either way. Can you just give an idea of what that meant to meet people like BJ and myself who were doing this very differently, I guess, to some of the ways it was being introduced by the DBA, or the medical cannabis side of it. So just thought share a little story about that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, early on when I was trying to get approved by the DBA to get access to medicinal cannabis, I reached out to Ubuntu, to you guys, and you guys were able to give me some support, advice, things I needed at the time just to try and keep through with this fight and this journey. And that was before I was able to get medicinal cannabis approved for myself from the DVA. Initially, I had to apply 4 times under PTSD, which was knocked back every time. And then after DVA telling me I'd had to lie and say I had chronic pain to get it, I told them I had chronic pain like they told me to, and lied and got my safer medication option. But finding other people in the journey, because obviously there's 100 years of prohibition and stigma on this plant, and in Australia we're slightly conservative at times, which has its good and bad points. In terms of this plant, it's something that we need to look at, and having other people who are brave enough to put themselves out there to go, hey, people, this is something that could work for you. This is something that science is showing has reasons why it is working as a medication. That helps the rest of us. All of us playing our little part together, help each other start to overcome the obstacles for this medicine.
Beautiful. Now, through meeting Derek, I then met Jason and took a road trip down to Wagga and to Wagga Wagga, and met with Jason at Pro Patria. And I can honestly say it was actually quite mind blowing. Firstly, to meet both of you, and then to meet Jason and what was happening in that incredible space. And I think for both of you, and particularly, I guess, with Pro Patria being a tangible reality for so many people needing help, what was really kind of mind-blowing for me, having worked with cannabis for so long, and 15,000 people that we've supported through, and learning from, people will report back to us their experiences, and we document everything. So we have a substantial amount of data over almost 12 years, and a lot of people. And then I get to travel to Wagga Wagga and meet with Jason and this incredible space called Pro Patria. And what I found really enlightening and really heartening was it wasn't necessarily about one field of people. The return veterans was enormous enough as it was, but you've also have people, first responders, ambulance, nurses, people who are on the front line that you're helping to support. So this is much bigger than one field of people who have, who are going through really traumatic and damaged experiences from their work, from what you do for a living. So just Jason, Pro Patria, I'd like people to hear the beginnings of it, because what you shared with me was the hardship of trying to get the outside world to understand what it was you were actually doing to support people and grow it. So I'd like to, please share more about that part.
Yeah, I think the big thing was, and it kind of goes back to your question before about the supports and the isolation afterwards. And as defence personnel, there's one organisation that we have as a bit of a support network before you hit up to that next level at the Department of Veteran Affairs, and that's the RSL. So a lot of us, when we get out, we actually go toward the RSL to try and get support through that. But as we've heard from the Royal Commission and from a lot of the things that have come out in these last kind of 5-10 years, a lot of the RSL's policies, procedures, constitution, and the framework that they have is quite restrictive in what they can and can't provide support for. And what we saw in our small regional area of Wagga was we initially were trying to get the supports that we needed through our RSL, but we were unable to achieve that because there just wasn't framework for that. So anything that we needed that was outside the box, we had to create ourselves. So we first got together with a defence shed, and the defence shed concept is based on the Australian Men's Shed Association, which gives us the ability to have workshop space, membership and things like that. And that's where we first really identified a few needs. One was the fact that we're not getting out to become veterans, we're getting out to become civilians. So in order to become a civilian, you've got to practice being a civilian. So getting into an isolated organisation where you only have other veterans around you is good for support in some elements, but it's obviously not going to bleed over to that wider expanse of being able to step out and understand what's going on in the civilian environment, because we are very detached from it, especially when we're institutionalised after years and decades in the military. So that was the first thing. So we started to incorporate first responders in our membership base, which was really good because there was a lot of similarities and crossover. There's a lot of kind of like-mindedness in a lot of that as well. But the second thing that we really identified was the need for medical services. Because again, all of us were in isolation. We're under these pharmaceutical protocols for our treatments. There was no other looking, and this is again pre-Royal Commission. There was no look at anything outside of what was directed by the agencies that were looking after those specific conditions. So we saw then there was a need for us to kind of grow this into some kind of a centre. And we actually got offered a monastery in Wagga, the Carmelite monastery. And the monastery was on its it only had a few of the nuns left there, and they really wanted it to go to an organisation that would be able to kind of carry on their mission. The monastery is really interesting itself. It's on the outskirts of Wagga toward Kapuka, and the area that it's in was actually the married quarters, and it housed the families of service personnel during the World War II. So it's a very military area, and this church, this monastery was actually built in that area post-Vietnam for returned service personnel. And if we look back through our own histories of the Vietnam era and before that, quite often it was the monks and the religious figures that would help people after service, and we've just kind of evolved that these days into our mental health hospitals. So the nuns saw it as quite fitting for us to be able to raise the funds to purchase the property. So we went to the public, we started raising funds, and we purchased the property in, I think it was 21. Around that time too, we started to connect with a heap of medical services that were doing a lot of the cutting edge medical stuff, brain scans, traumatic brain injuries, understanding neurology, understanding gut health and things like that. And we started to draw those resources into our region. And again, you said before about the fact that it's not just us that are dealing with these problems, and we kind of fell into the system that was supporting all of us, and it let us down through our chronic injuries. And then when we look around, we can see a lot of other people that might not be ex-military or even first responders that are falling into those same kind of crevices and unable to get out. So from the get-go, our mission wasn't just to provide services to veterans and or first responders, it's to provide a better service to our community. And through that, we're able to draw in these incredibly cutting-edge resources that DVA is now supporting in a lot of elements, and provide that crossover to our public network of health as well. So that way we've got other providers that are seeing what's working and what's not working. And it's about kind of providing that education. As it stands today, we raised the $1.5 million for the purchase of the property, and the federal government's actually matched that 1.3 or about $1.3 million for us to build official defence shed facilities out there. So we've got our training activities. but we're still obviously raising funds and finances to bring in more of the medical services and provide that as the established kind of need there, as these new services kind of evolve in with DVA, post-Royal Commission, looking at a lot of new ways to treat brain health.
Here, and we'll put up the link that goes to your fundraising and see if we can help to instigate some of that as well, because it's a walking around that facility with you and the people that were there with the gardens and the conversations, it was really incredible. And I kind of had this idea we could just kind of copy it, pick it up and move it to Newcastle. I'd be very happy, but we don't have anything like that. And it's very inspiring to know that you're creating an incredible template that other people down the track can draw upon and spread that much further. And it's interesting what you said earlier in relation to bringing in the first responders and the general public who were going through this. And yesterday, Derek and I were having a conversation around this in particular. And Derek, you made a comment, and it was you're an ear for the general population. You're an ear for the rest. And I just want to be really wonderful to hear you kind of open up that when because of your own experiences, you feel that you're an ear for others. And how would you describe that? Is it a responsibility? Is it an offering? Is it something that comes naturally? How does that go for you?
Was that for me or for Derek? Yeah.
Oh, sorry, for Derek.
Derek, yeah. So, yeah, that was a good conversation we had yesterday, Nikki, about this in terms of Jason and myself being returned service persons, been overseas for our country, done a few bits and pieces, whatever. We've come back and we've noticed there's this issue amongst veterans, initially amongst ourselves, that things weren't working. We needed a different medication. We've seen that, as Jason was saying, it's first responders as well. It's also the whole civilian population. And I guess when you've signed up to serve your country in a way, it doesn't automatically stop when you're not in the military anymore. You still have that ethos inside you that you want to help your country, you want to help your people, which is obviously evident in what Jason's been doing with Pro Patria, and in a way with what has been going on with the No More Zombie Veteran campaign, lobbying for safer medication options. So with that, there is a duty we have inside. It's not something that you talk about to each other because it's just a thing that's in you. We do have a responsibility to look after our country as people who have been in the military and served. We do have a responsibility to look after not only each other as veterans and first responders, but to look after our country and our people. And that is something that we're doing through these things that we're doing.
I really felt that you're bringing what you were doing overseas, in your case in Iraq and other areas, and Jason being posted in different areas, and you're bringing that same drive, that same inspiration, that same energy to serve your country in a different way. And that it's felt. I can feel it. I can feel it in my body, in my being. I can actually even feel the emotion that comes with that. Because up until you just said that, Derek, that hadn't even crossed my mind that it was a continuum. That you guys are a continuum of what you've been doing. You haven't stopped and taken on a new persona to even though you've come into the civilian world, you're bringing with it such profound experience and mateship and all of those things that you've not just experienced and lived, but now you can share that. That's really quite groundbreaking to hear that. And again,
oh, good.
Go.
No, that's good. That's good that it's that sounds good. It's groundbreaking. It's just a natural thing. I mean, we signed up to serve the country, and I guess Jason and myself, in a way, our transition into civilian life has been a transition into still helping or something like that. It's not like, yeah, yeah. I don't know how you'd say it, Jay, but
I think it comes down to purpose. I mean, I probably had very little purpose as a young Australian growing up, and that's, I think, why I might have been attracted to joining the military, because there is that sense of purpose for defending your country and everything else, and you tend to lean on that quite heavily in defence, and it's very much ingrained into you how important your role is and how important it is to have the ethos of a soldier and to deploy overseas and to do your job over there and do it correctly and abide military law and all the things that go on top of that. You really do become a cog in a pretty impressive machine. But that feeling of being discarded is what breaks a lot of us, I think, on that exit strategy. And then compounding that with isolation, compounding that with polypharmacy, compounding that with family breakdowns and everything else, the loss of purpose is devastating. It completely floors, I think, anyone who would go through that process. And then in a sense, there's a kind of a death in that. And a lot of people maybe go too far with that when they successfully commit suicide. But we've got people that go through these profound shifts in understanding. And for me, that's what happened, I think, when I came out of my funk in 2021, the latest one. I came to a realization, and even before then, it started to kind of like bubble to the surface. But I don't want to leave this place worse than I found it. And I've now got kids on this earth that have to live here without me when I am gone. And I'm blessed to have that, but I'm also blessed to be in a position to try and make the space that I leave for them a better space. And I think that's what it comes down to. And it's that sense of purpose, but also that sense of like, what is our purpose? Is our purpose to leave this place a mess, or is our purpose to try and at least make it a little bit better for when we do leave this place?
That's beautiful and true, and it rings. So as this is Cannabis Talks, bringing that plant medicine in now into this conversation, I'm curious, we'll go Derek first. What was your relationship to cannabis before you brought it in as a healing modality?
I had dabbled with it when I was younger, once or twice. Then being married and having a family, I was not using it, of course. I dabbled in it for a medication option out of desperation when the marriage failed 10 years ago and I was left temporarily homeless. My mum took me in. I'd had crippling anxiety, like in the chest there for it was about 3 months at that stage. Felt like someone was just driving their knee in 24/7. It was just painful, sore. I had no medication that could help it in any way. The best any of the 12 odd medications I had, the best thing they could do is knock me out for a day, and I'd be groggy and stuffed, even worse for a few days after that. So yeah, in desperation at the time, I got some street stuff, went around the corner, to within 5 seconds of inhaling a bit of this, all that pain just disappeared. It completely instantly disappeared. My head cleared up. I could think. I wasn't in this foggy, medicated polypharmacy state for probably an hour or two. And it was life changing, groundbreaking. I told my treating doctors and psychs, hey, I tried some of this and it's helping. And they're like, yeah, we've noticed something's changed. Like, whatever you're doing, don't stop doing it. And they wrote my first thing to Veterans Affairs saying, hey, this guy's exhausted every treatment option as per your guidelines. Whereas treating practitioners, we recommend if he put on this medicinal cannabis, get approved to use it. That was, yeah, which never happened under hadn't yet happened for mental health, but got it under chronic pain. So I've been able to function a lot better with a stable medication that's working better for me.
have you noticed or observed in yourself that there has been a deepening, or how has your relationship to the plant itself changed, if in any way? Have you noticed anything that is different in your psyche or your energy in relation to that direct conversation with the plant?
Yeah, it's hard to say because I'm sort of new to the whole, if you want to say, spiritual side of things. In terms of how my functioning, my body, mentally, physically, spiritually is functioning since being on this medication the last couple of years, I'm going really good. I'm functioning. I'm functioning enough that I can campaign and lobby DVA for this policy change. I can't do it all the time. Um, I do feel, in a sense, I do have more respect for the plant now that I've, both through lived experience and looking at all the research and studies to give all this evidence to DVA to change their policy. It's just mind blowing, some of the stuff that this plant does, and then going through that yourself. So I have a very healthy respect for it from as a medication and from an educational point of view. I can, yeah, it's like almost every other day, my mind, and I'm getting open to different aspects of this, reading up another study of what it does, hearing another story of someone about how it helps them, and then relaying and just putting that against myself and thinking, wow, okay, I did go through something similar like that. Or, yeah, just looking at the difference it's making for people in all the different medical facets, like whatever they need it for, it's helping, you know.
Jason, what about you? How is your relationship to cannabis prior to bringing it into the healing journey?
So I dabbled with it a bit before joining the army, like later in school years. And I remember every time I used to smoke weed, I'd think I was getting dumber. And that was evident with some of the people around me that were hitting it pretty hard. And I had this conceived idea of the damage it was doing. So it used to freak me out a fair bit when I'd use it. And then obviously in the army, 16 years, we didn't touch anything like that during my service. Um, it, it wasn't until I hadn't even thought of it as an option for anything, because again, it was completely out of my wheelhouse. But I'd actually sat down. It was with a psych, I think the year after I'd medically discharged, might have been 16 or 17. And my psychiatrist had seen me go downhill on what was happening. And he literally slid a card across the table to me and said, I can't condone this, but you should contact these guys and see what they're doing. And that card was for Weeded Warrior, who were one of the first kind of advocacy groups, veteran groups to kick off. And they were the guys that brought a lot of that tech back, knowledge back, and obviously worked with you, Nikki, back in the day as well to learn about cannabis. And through that, I started to learn about it, but I was still very skeptical. I was very skeptical on everything, but I started to look at the research, and I think I read a book, or I listened to an audio book on cannabis pharmacy, I think it was called, and that explained a little bit more. I discussed it with my wife at the time, and we're now separated. And that was one of the first key points of our separation, I think, kicked off there, where I started to talk about the options of me trying this new illicit substance to try and alleviate my symptoms. And she threatened divorce if I'd even thought about touching that too. So that stigma from the get-go was incredibly solid and deep. So for me, I had to sneak around to actually use my first bit of medicinal bit of cannabis. And similar to Derek, I didn't get it through DVA to kick off with. I had to go down to a dodgy servo at 11 o'clock at night and ask the shadiest dude I could find if I could get some weed off him. And he jumped in my car. We ended up driving to one of the better known suburbs in Wagga for this type of thing. And he jumped out and jumped back in about 10 minutes later with a little foilie. And I went home underneath the house, made myself a makeshift bong, bong with the memory that I had of how to do that when I was a kid, and had that down in my garage. And then I remember trying to sneak upstairs, and this was after years of polypharmacy and everything else. I went and laid down on my bed, and I slept for about 6 hours solid for the first time in years. And I woke up in the morning, and I opened my eyes, and it was a very different feeling. I didn't feel like I'd had to knock myself out to get sleep. I actually felt mildly refreshed, and I went, wow, that's kind of different. And then from there, it was very much experimentation, because in those early days, we didn't have prescribing knowledge. We didn't really understand even what CBD was. We'd heard about it, and we were kind of trying to mix it in there, but none of the stuff that we could get access to had any CBD in it. So I was using it in vapes, I was smoking it in joints. But what I would notice is when I'd use it and I'd have some, it was like I got access back to my frontal brain. And when I was in that part of my brain, I could connect with my kid. I could go outside and have a look around. I had my puppy dogs, I could pat my dogs. And it was like this weird thing where I could reconnect. And then as it would fade off, I'd go back into my shell again and back into that kind of horrible, dark headspace. So, that took me years of doing that. Using the cannabis, I could do things. I used it for my physiotherapy. I used it for my counseling. I used it for my family interaction. I used it anytime I left the house. That's what I was using. And as it would fade off, I'd go back again. And it was nearly like you talked about the kind of the spiritual side or the education side of it. I feel like for me, a lot of the time that I was using, especially the high THC, it was acting a little bit like a mirror. So where I would be sitting there in a state of anger, frustration, and everything else, when I'd have some medicine on board, instead of me just feeling that straight up emotion, I could dig deeper down in to see where that was coming from. And that would often reflect back at me some of the things that I might be able to improve or areas that would go. So we talk about it being a teacher. I think we're the teachers inside of us. This just merely gives us a chance to be able to look at ourselves from a different perspective to maybe see if we can improve on those areas. And for me, I had to keep it in secrecy for a very long time. I didn't really, and any time I did go loud about it or I did speak openly about it, there'd be that stigma. So I think that was a lot of the reason a lot of us got pushed away from RSL back in the day, because we were seen as druggos, because we were doing these other medicines. Yet, and even then, like, I've had accusations thrown at us that if we get support for these things, you're going to have a bunch of veterans running around on drugs. And what we have right now is a bunch of veterans running around on drugs that we're trying to get off of them onto things that help them medicinally to heal and everything else. So my relationship with it has definitely grown. Like even today, I don't need to smoke it anymore. I barely even need to vape. Predominantly, I'll take oil or I'll eat the plant. I'll cook it up and I'll put it in things to be able to consume it. I find that helps me a lot more, but I still take it daily, every single morning. It's part of my morning routine is to have some good oil, highly balanced with CBD and THC, usually equal or more CBD is what I prefer. And then if I want to do some meditation or some inside work, then I take a high dose of THC and I'm able to then reflect on things, problem solve, see where I need to improve things. And again, just looking back and reflecting over my journey, I mean, I've come through some pretty significant addictions and things like that I've had to overcome to get to this point. But progressively, I'm getting better. And I can't say that for any other drug that I've ever taken, that I've gotten better the longer I've used it, because every other drug I've taken, the longer I've needed to use it, I've gotten worse. So it's a very different way of kind of healing, I guess.
And that's that synergy between the plant and the human body that then allows that healing journey to continue, to open, to grow, to evolve, and this is what we've been seeing for how many, 12, 14 years, whatever it's been. And so you're being able to articulate that is really groundbreaking for a lot of people. So there are people who'll be listening to this who haven't really understood that there is a relationship that starts, and the more you join in that relationship, the more you contribute to it yourself, then the greater the benefits are. I mean, that's definitely number one thing that we've learned in 13 years is the more that a person is willing to explore that relationship in themselves with the plant, that the benefits are far more significant than somebody who's kind of still taking it more as a pharmacological healing agent, you know, where it's rigid. So I take this amount of drops at this time, and I'll take that at that time, and you know, and I'll add it into my daily routine because I'm being told in the script to do it. But the ones that explore and experiment, which is what you've been doing, you know, standing outside and watching the world, and with the dog and the children. I mean, these are really beautiful examples of the depth and the nature of the plant that is so beyond our conditioned understanding and our fear-based relationship we have as a society that has been drilled in to us. You know, in our early days, I was very reticent to kind of embrace the plant. BJ was making the oil, he was providing it to people who really needed it. But I was more concerned about the legalities and the 20 years jail that we were facing, and you know, that practical side of it. Even though I had no personal issues with the plant, I didn't know anybody who had been badly affected, so it was never in my field. But this fear about what was going to happen legally, or I'm doing something wrong, you know, all of those things. Because my own first experience with cannabis and smoking joints, you know, in high school, was I'd sit in the corner and go, "Don't anyone talk to me." I go into this paranoia, so it wasn't that great. So it is, you know, our role as for not just the three of us, but for all the people in our field. It's not just helping people understand the benefits of the plant, it's breaking through those conditioning, which, you know, continues to kind of change and evolve. So back in 2011 or 2012, when we were introduced to cannabis as a healing agent, it was the legalities, it was the unconscious fears, it was the lack of supply. There was no CBD basically in this country. It was all THC, and the CBD had been bred out of all the street THC that was available. You know, and like I talk to practitioners now that we're training, and I'll, you know, and they go, "Oh, I'm not really sure which oil I've got to give this person." You know, in the early days when they're just learning, they're like, "Okay, if a person has, you know, chronic pain, and we've got this oil and we've got that oil, and I've got to get it right." And I laugh and I say, "Have a guess how many oils we had when we started?" And they'll go, "Oh, you know, 4, 5, 10, whatever." And I go, "We had one, and it was THC dominant. Then there was two, it was higher THC dominant." You know, and we were working with everything: cancer, epilepsy, you know, menopause, everything that people were walking into the clinic to discuss. We only had THC dominant, but we had the hemp seeds, we had the nutrition, we had the sound work, we had the very holistic and integrated approach, which was kind of really groundbreaking in those days and quite revolutionary, which we kind of now have to step it up again because, you know, now 14 years down the track, we need to open up an even greater field of educating and helping people to explore. Now, to me, that word is so important. You've got to explore it yourself. You know, this is plant medicine. It has an intelligence, or at the very least has the natural interaction with our body, our endocannabinoid system. So I guess this leads us into a beautiful next phase of, you know, there are these issues faced by return soldiers and return vets and first responders, frontline people, but also everyday people. We live in a traumatized world. Our society is rocked by, you know, technology that's causing issues, our environmental toxins, you know, our lack of education on basic health, the water that we're drinking. You know, we are bombarded. So, and the good news is we're all going to be continuing to educate, grow, put programs together. And you mentioned the Royal Commission earlier, and that was Jason. You suggested to me that we put in a submission. So I spent quite a few months getting our evidence-based research together, putting a whole lot into it, and then realized that through that process, I'd actually unintentionally created a solution and a program that we can work with return vets and first responders in an educational, in a support role, that we can now start to roll out. So, you know, off the back of these talks, you know, there's so many exciting things that can generate that support. So Derek, what would you, if you had maybe one and probably hard to narrow it down. If you had one suggestion as a solution for moving beyond people who are loaded on the pharmaceuticals or feeling that chronic pain, that isolation, just what would be one solution that makes sense to you for us to take a next step?
Yeah, I guess if it's people that are on these traditional medications that aren't finding any relief, best thing is to look up what the endocannabinoid system is, get an understanding of why and how the compounds in this plant-based medicine in medicinal cannabis, why they offer relief for mental health, physical health, a range of conditions. It just comes down to education and making good choices for yourself. What's going to work, what's not going to work. Not every medication works for everyone. Yes, we've had 100 years of stigma on this plant. It's terrible. It's going to lead you to to hell. Heroin's probably better for you. All these other things that we hear in our society that add to the generations of stigma against this. I find for myself having open and honest dialogues and conversations with people, like what we're doing here with people in the street that stop me and ask me, people that contact me about the campaign, and they're like, "Oh, you're just trying to get them all to smoke weed." I'm like, well, no. If you have a look at it, what we're trying to do is give a healthier and safer medication option. When the Royal Commission itself finds evidence that the polypharmacy psych drugs are worsening veterans' health conditions and adding to the veteran suicide rate. And veterans are saying, hey, these medications are making us feel as a medicated, lobotomized zombie. We need a different medication option. Then it's just clear. You just got to look at stuff. You just got to look at things for yourself. Don't listen to what other people take things on board. Obviously, what other people are saying, but have a good hard look and educate yourself.
Like that. Take a long, hard look at and educate yourself whilst you're taking a hard, long look at yourself.
Indeed.
Self-responsibility.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Derek, keep going.
No, all good.
All good. Jay, what about you? What's your, if you could have, one significant solution, or approach, what would it be?
It'd be probably very similar to what Derek said. I mean, for me, the cannabis was certainly a platform, and that platform allowed me to then step off onto other things to help advance my healing kind of journey as well. And I think the takeaway of what started me to really start to break apart, because we've got a very complicated medical system with every single part of our body put in a different category for what disease that is and everything else. And it's overwhelming trying to track that. For me, once I learnt about the endocannabinoid system and I could understand that our cells needed to be healthy and they needed certain things to allow our cells, which is what we're all made of, to be healthy, then I kind of simply added things to promote cell health. And then through that, I've progressively gotten better. So everything I've done from that first platform of cannabis has been nutrition, has been exercise, like the ketamine program I'm on, the psychedelics and what they're doing these days, meditation, breath work, yoga practices. Again, all these things are about giving the body more ability for it to stay functional, I guess. So I think the key is research and looking into, again, maybe functional medicine, into what cells are, what cells need to kind of survive, like zinc, vitamin C, vitamin D. Like, these are my meds now. I don't take a fistful of pharmaceuticals every morning. I'm popping the pill drawer, but I'm getting out the vitamins that I might not be getting out of my diet. So, and that for me helps with my brain function. It helps with my gut function, and that helps with my body function. So I think about, yeah, you say one piece, it's very hard to give one piece, but I think the key is to go be curious and explore and see what is out there and what's working for other people. Because these days too, I'll say one more. If I'm speaking to someone who has never had the disease that I've got and they would never try the drugs that they're telling me to try, I'm very skeptical. If I go and speak to someone who's lived through what I've lived through and they've told me that this has worked for them, I'm probably more likely to try that avenue. And for me, that's led to a lot of success.
Well, that actually dovetails into one of the bees I get in my bonnet, so to speak, is practitioners who are discussing or recommending or prescribing cannabis and actually have no relationship, they have no understanding, and they have no personal directive or have investigated it themselves, and actually a lot of them may even have prejudices against the plant. So that is a bee in my bonnet. Is people should. This is an opinion, so I'll just state it, that I don't believe that any person should be recommending, working, or assisting other people in relation to cannabis unless they actually have their own deep connection or they've explored it themselves, because otherwise they're bringing an ignorant perspective into that field, and then that person who is receiving that recommendation or script or the current oversupply, as we've discussed, of cannabis products to veterans who need the help, but they're just being bombarded by this new system, that doesn't help. It actually adds another layer of a problem. So in my ideal world, anybody who's not related to the plant, get out of the way and let people who are understanding of it and have done the due diligence to be the ones that communicate with people around the plant medicine. So
I think that's interesting too, because just reflecting on what's happening in the psychedelic space. So Australia is now the first country in the world to legalise psychedelics for medicinal purposes. And through this, there's a lot of practitioners in Australia at the moment, psychiatrists and psychologists, that are conducting therapy sessions under the guise of our medical framework. And then in that, they're conducting psychedelic assisted therapies. So they're using these medicines to assist in the therapy. And one of the prerequisites, I believe, that's happening for most of these cases is that the psychiatrists and the psychologists must have undergone the therapy themselves, the plant medicine therapy, to be able to be qualified enough to actually admit the therapy. And it's interesting because if I think cannabis had come down through this same pathway, then it might be getting treated very similar. But because it's been a very different battle for cannabis, and it's been this, 2017, this got legalized federally as a medicine, yet none of our laws have updated. Not one doctor out there is allowed to publicly speak on the positive effects of the medicine. So people have got this very misconstrued idea about what it is. If I ask someone generally in the public who has had no exposure to it, they're going to tell me, and they have done repeatedly, that it might cause psychosis, that there's no evidence that it works for anything, and that we need to be very cautious of it. Yet if I speak to doctors that aren't on screen saying this, or if I speak to patients that are doing it, I've heard of people that have reversed cancer, they've reversed neurological disorders, they've managed to do autism. I know people that have gone through this and done this, and I think all of us probably listening to this have probably know someone, if not themselves, that have had some benefit from it. So I think it's incredible that if we've got specialists out there that are prescribing, that have that same belief system, they probably aren't prescribing the right type of medicine for that type of person. And I think what we're seeing maybe is that it might not work for everyone, but if you use it right, it probably will work, because biologically it's doing A, B, and C. And if you need A, B, and C done and you use it right, then A, B, and C could lead to you being of better health. So I think it's this whole misconception and stigma that's causing a lot of people to be fearful of looking at the research or going to find what the research is. But unless we've got platforms to be able to talk about what that research is, we're really never going to get the proper information out there.
And also on that, Jay, the platform about not only the information and the research, but the, if you want to say, disinformation or the outdated information, that which is one of the things we're trying, besides education, is trying to raise awareness of. This information is so outdated. I mean, the whole psychosis issue started in a study published in 1987 of 45,000 Swedish conscripts studied over 15 years. That's a major study. And they found there was a link. They found there must be a link between heavy cannabis use and psychosis, and from that, everyone is all the experts have sort of hung their hat and they're like, yeah, there is a link to psychosis. There was this 15-year study back in the 80s of 45,000 Swedish conscripts, etc. The year following that, the endocannabinoid system was published, and there's been no review of the evidence. None of these experts that are giving government advice and policy on using this plant, medicinal cannabis, they don't acknowledge the endocannabinoid system. They don't have anything about it in their policies. They don't seem to have any idea or clue about how it works. So how can they inform something so important for people's health, like policy on using this plant at a government federal level, when they have no understanding of it and ignorance and bias against it? That's my experience, but yeah.
And even through the things that I think we've looked at, I think the majority of the research papers that are being referred to, even the ones that are post 2016, are actually reviews of papers pre 2016. So when cannabis was used illegally predominantly, and a lot of the studies back then were formed around showing the dangers of it, not the medicinal use. Yet again, this is big, gaping black hole in Australia where from 2017 till now, no other plant on earth, I think, has been studied more widely than in Australia and probably overseas. I saw somewhere, and again, you could dig it up and find out if I'm right or wrong, but maybe 32,000 papers have been published on cannabis since 2016, or maybe even closer to now. And of them, none of them are referred to in any of our literature because apparently they're not what we're allowed to use as research. I don't understand that part. There's a big gap there for me.
Well, maybe with some of the things that we're doing individually, and I know that we'll be working more together, and I'm really looking forward to launching this Catalyst project, which came from that work from the Royal Commission submission, to fill those gaps. So not to fill them specifically, those gaps there, but to create this new awareness and these new opportunities, because people have that direct experience, that lived experience of having a whole other way of living. They're living freer, without the constraints of the pain or the trauma or the pharmacological side of it. So, that's the exciting part with the people like ourselves who are dedicated. We've got the experience, and we kind of continue to be excited. It's just like a vertical learning curve that doesn't end. And that's what really is a great opportunity, is to develop more infrastructure for that education, for that awareness, for that direct experience in the right environment. And then that opens and spreads out further. So, it's fun, it's educational, it's serious, all at the same time. So, I know we all take this really seriously. It's our lives, in various ways. So I'm going to wrap up this talk. And again, very privileged. This will be launched on ANZAC Day. And after this conversation, I feel a deeper understanding and a deeper respect for the work that you are both doing to continue on from what was your work, what was your living in the armed forces, and how that's rolling out now. So I feel very honoured to have heard that very clearly in today's conversation and our cannabis talks today. And I feel that that's such a profound, powerful message, and it really shows who you are, who you both are, and you're amazing. So Derek, anything you would like to kind of add to bring our little talk to a close?
Something I was thinking about earlier at the beginning of what introduced me to trying cannabis as a medication for my condition for PTSD. And I remember it was an SBS documentary I saw called Weed Etiquette. Season 1, episode 2 was two American Iraq veterans. One was stuck on the psych med option, and where he was where I was, living in isolation, getting worse, no contact with family or anyone, just a really bad place. The other person was going against what VA was in the States was telling him to do, was using cannabis medicinally. Holy cow, the dude was functioning, he was stable-ish, he had a family again, he was going outdoors, he was doing the opposite of this person. I saw that and I was like, that's what drove me to go around the corner and go find some of this stuff. Go find the shadiest person I can, go do something illegal to try and get better so I could be a functioning person and be a dad and a parent again, you know.
Awesome. Thank God that tool was there, that right moment, right place, right time. Something opened it up. What about you, Jay?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for everything you're doing, Nikki. You and your team, incredible. The years that you've put in, I think, yeah, without the work that you're doing and your organisation, we wouldn't be where we are in Australia today. So I think we are making roads into the right areas, and I'm honoured to be a part of this. So thank you so much for inviting us along.
It's got goosebumps. What I'm going to, and thank you. Yeah, felt and appreciated, and yeah, we all know it's been a crazy, tough journey, but we're still here, and you know, apart from grey hair and more wrinkles, we're still going. But I think for our next talk, I'm going to send. We'll drink some cannabis tea. We'll have some kind of tea together, and we'll make it more relaxed, and we'll start to share an experience as we're having it. That might be a bit of fun, something in real time. But really appreciate everything that you've given, what you've got, what you've shared, and yeah, look forward to more. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Nikki, thanks, Derek.
Thanks, Jay.
This conference will now be recorded.
I just wanted for you to repeat that, Derek. That was gold.
Oh, crap. I don't even remember what I said.
It was about if you're not serving your taking, and you were talking about the. No, you know what? I can't remember exactly either, but it was. Well, I'll keep a recording anyway as we finish off, because I realise now what I would like in future is these talks to be a little more like this, that we're having fun, we're relaxing, and we're getting into it. But you know, the first one was really good, really appreciative, and you know, I'm fired up more than I've ever been. Actually,
oh, cool.
I'm more. There's more energy. There's more direction. There's so much behind us to serve. You know, so I feel more strongly in service right in this moment than I've ever felt in my life. So
that's what I said before. Now, sorry, it just popped back into my head. So yeah, Nikki, the way we sort of see it, or the way I see it, is that there's a lack of direction in our country in terms of guys don't know how to be guys, dads don't know how to be dads, people don't know how to be in a family, they don't know if they're what gender they are, they seem to be distrusting of politicians for some reason. So if you've got people trying to spruik a plant-based medicine, okay, fair enough. What's their credibility? So if you get a couple of guys or people, a group of people who have served their country in the military, they've served overseas, you know, and they're still trying to serve in a way, they've been through the military doctrine, you know, they're trying to do something for their country. At least, hopefully, people can start looking up and going, oh, okay, well, these guys have some credibility behind them. They've gone through this lived experience. They've served their country overseas. They've done this, that, and the other. They could just be doing nothing like most people. Instead, they are fighting for change. They're realizing there's issues. There's realizing there's, say, from the No More Zombie perspective, there's, you know, the traditional psych medication for mental health long term with massive amounts of polypharmacy. It doesn't generally seem to work. It seems to cause issues and increase suicide rates, as the Royal Commission found. What can we do? We can try and help. We can educate. We can push for policy reform, continue what we did in the military, try and be that a bit of a guiding light in the country to say, hey, don't give up, people. There is a way. Just follow what we're doing, come along for the journey, learn about the endocannabinoid system, why this medicine works.
Jay, what's your thoughts on Derek's comment in relation to where people are finding themselves, men not being men, families being broken? What's your take on that? It's definitely a good point to discuss.
It depends how deep down the rabbit hole you want to go, but I found that myself when I got out. It was like I had my brain wiped, and in that state with addictions, phone addictions, porn addiction, we're being taken away from our kind of spiritual environment and put in these dark little holes. And I'm seeing it a lot. Family breakdowns in our community are, I reckon they must be at record numbers now. There's more and more people I know that are separating because of problems at home that aren't being addressed. There's all these forces at play that encourage that, Nelly. I mean, I know that many people going through family courts at the moment, and the families are getting divided. It's catastrophic. And again, for me, I probably got on the plant medicines too late to save my marriage, but I'm hoping that other people can connect in this healing journey at the start. And it is about the families as well, because if the families are separated from the individual that's going through the trauma, that's going to create more separation. So having the families included and that awareness in the family of what these medicines can do and how to utilize them correctly can bring the families closer together to help that isolation and those other kind of influences not be so prevalent. But I think he's right. I'm seeing it hand over fist where we're not encouraged to be masculine, or we're not encouraged to be leaders. And if you do, you get shot down. So it takes a brave person to be able to go beyond that and still stand up for what they truly believe in.
Yeah, bring it on.
Well, you guys are the epitome of that male role model. And yeah, thank you. Because it's needed. I completely agree. I'm glad we touched on that one. It's needed. Yeah. So, okay. Yay.
Thanks, Nikki.